All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for being with us for our County Commission meeting of August 6, 2024. I'll call this meeting to order. Let me read the ethics reminder to the board. In accordance with the Code of Ethics adopted by the board, all county commissioners have a duty to obey all applicable laws regarding official actions, to uphold the integrity and independence of the office, to avoid impropriety in the exercise of official duties, to faithfully perform the duties of the office, and to conduct the affairs of the governing board in an open and public manner. Is there any item on the agenda, the outcome of which would have a direct, substantial, and readily identifiable financial impact for any board member? Does any board member have a financial interest in any public contract coming before the board today? There being none, all board members have a duty and obligation to vote on any matters that the County Commission votes on at our meeting this evening. I also wanted to announce that we have parking validation and bus passes available for commission workshops and meetings. Anyone parking for this meeting or using the bus can pick up passes from security on their way out, and those are valid for today only. All right, we come to the consent agenda. Are there any items on the consent agenda that any commissioners have any questions on? And are there any members of the community that have any questions about any items on the consent agenda? Okay, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda and to follow the agenda as published?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. Okay, we now come to the public comment period. And there are three folks that signed up for public comment, so we'll go through the list of everyone that signed up. We'd ask folks to come up to the podium here, and everyone will have 3 minutes to provide their comments. And once I go through the list of the folks that signed up, if there's anyone else who wants to speak during public comment, there'll be an opportunity to do so. All right, and I apologize if I mispronounce anyone's names. The first person that signed up is Phyllis. Sorry, I don't have a last name, I don't think.
Good evening. Thank you for your service to the community. Fourth descendant of the Phillips family, Western Carolina. Last discussion, we talked about securing the Southeast region with the states of North Carolina, West Virginia, and Maryland. I had the privilege of being raised 10 minutes outside of D.C., where I was well educated by many federal, state, and local civil servants and government officials. If we studied a graph of the economy for the last 100 years, ideally we would find two parallel lines with the cost of living and wages going up at about 2.5% per year, and things would be fine, but that has not been the case. Many have studied the economic impact of the population increases, the Industrial Revolution, and looked at it more like a wheel, with the media, the family unit, and community as the nucleus, and every other affecting variable of, healthcare, education, transportation, energy, economy, labor, etc., and how they all interrelate. Almost all agree we would have reached this destination no matter who was running the show or the world. Depopulation and abruptly ending social programs is not a good solution. All people of faith in social justice would agree to that. The suggestion is the three states, Maryland, West Virginia, and North Carolina, temporarily claim independence, with three teams, Republican, Democratic, and Independent. That's 6 publicly elected officials representing all, to make continued forward progress. Maryland would have to concentrate on the Potomac River that leads to D.C., the Port of Baltimore, and our bay. West Virginia has been working on reorganizing the entire school system from pre-K 3 to 30 years old. And North Carolina, I think, should concentrate on adult education and conservation, preservation, and building and training as many park police as possible, canines and equines. At the end of the day, this would box in a more secure perimeter around the Pentagon and Langley in Virginia, and potentially disrupts contraband and human trafficking. 100 years of civil war, Central and South America needs to end. West Virginia's work with justice building transitional communities for people trying to transition out of the black market workforce. Everyone wants out, from the adolescent minor recruited last week to the kingpins getting all the credit for the blame. A more formal presentation can be provided by someone who is retired or currently working in and around our nation's capital. Year-round education from 3 to 30 years old with STEM and the equivalent of National Park Police, healthy, strong young people will keep them in a protected environment until they age out of the recruitment age of these undesirable work positions.
All right, thank you. All right, next is Rob Jackson.
Good evening, Chairman Newman, Commissioners, Madam County Manager. My name is Rob Jackson. I have the honor and pleasure of living in western Buncombe County and serving as the superintendent for the Buncombe County School System. Growing up in Swannanoa, my parents impressed upon my 3 sisters and I the absolute importance of taking the time to say 2 very big words, and those words are thank you. Sharing our appreciation and gratitude is something that has always been important to our family, and it's important to our school system. And so this evening, I just wanted to take a moment to share my thanks with this Board of County Commissioners and the thanks of our Board of Education for the investment the commissioners have made in our school system. We recognize that while we may not have gotten all that we asked for, we did receive an increase and have received an increase of over $25 million over the last 4 years. So again, we simply want to say thank you. We appreciate the partnership. As we prepare for the start of school in the next couple of weeks, we certainly invite our commissioners to join us and enjoy those first few days of school with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for all your service to our schools. All right, the last person that signed up is Lang Hornthal. All right, great. From the Eco Foresters of Asheville.
Good evening. My name is Lang Hornthal, and I'm the co-executive director of Eco Foresters, a Buncombe County-based forestry nonprofit whose mission is the restoration and conservation of our forests. We work mostly with private landowners, helping them navigate the management of their forests in the face of climate change and development pressures. The region's forests have been heavily utilized over the many generations, and most need restorative action. The solutions we recommend are nuanced and vary landowner to landowner, but are all based on scientific research that consider the ecological, economic, and social importance that forests bring our county and our communities. But tonight I'm here in support of the U.S. Forest Service and their ambitious GAP project that you will hear more about later. I'd like to share that this project is inspiring for not only its landscape approach, but also its objective to solve hard problems. The challenges facing on forests on both public and private land are daunting and made more difficult by climate change, which is why we must focus efforts on restoring particular fire-adapted sections of the Pisgah National Forest and reducing potential wildfire risk to nearby communities like what we saw in 2016. Using controlled burning and vegetation management that will modify fuel loads, native ecosystems will be more resilient and better adapted for the change that we all know is coming. It's also important to share that this project was collaboratively developed. Western North Carolina has an incredible group of nonprofits, agencies, and scientists that have been working together to find viable solutions to complex problems. In today's age of wicked problems, no solutions are foolproof or solved with a silver bullet. Rather, they are tackled by dedicated professionals that live in our community, like you, who have devoted their lives to serving the greater good. Eco Foresters is proud to be a part of this project and hopes that our local government will support this effort. Thank you.
Thanks, Lang. Thanks for being here. All right, are there any other members of the public that would like to speak during public comment? All right, we appreciate everyone who took time to come out. Okay, we've got several presentations, and the first one is an update on avian flu. And I think Nathan Green is here to help us out with this.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Thank you for having us. My name's Nathan Green. I'm the Public Health Preparedness Coordinator for Buncombe County. Here with me is Dr. Ellis Matheson, our Health Director, to give you an update on the avian flu situation. Our goal here today in this presentation is to describe what avian flu is and how it spreads. We want to outline what public health and its partners are doing to monitor and prevent the spread and educate the community and individuals on protective measures. Avian flu or bird flu is a highly infectious respiratory disease that primarily affects and is spread by migratory birds, but can also affect mammals and even humans. The current virus is widespread and causes outbreaks in poultry and dairy cattle, along with several isolated human cases in the United States. Since April 2024, there have been 10 reported human cases of avian flu in the United States, with 4 linked to sick dairy cows and 6 linked to infected poultry. The USDA has reported infections in 169 dairy cattle across 13 states and outbreaks in 34 commercial and 16 backyard flocks. That affects over 18 million birds. In eastern North Carolina, we've had 2 commercial farms, 1 backyard flock, and 1 dairy herd affected. And I'm happy to say that North Carolina is now infection-free and the quarantines have been lifted. Public health uses several surveillance methods to monitor for human cases of avian flu with other flu types such as case reporting, laboratory testing, emergency department trends, hospital admissions, and wastewater testing, which was put in place during the COVID-19 pandemic. Currently, the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services is working with an academic partner to perform subtyping on the current strain of avian flu in our wastewater. That will allow us to detect and investigate the source further. Public health recommends if you find yourself working with dead or infected animals or materials that have the virus on it, use personal protective equipment such as what you see here in the slide, and monitor for respiratory symptoms for 10 days, or monitor for respiratory symptoms and eye redness for 10 days after the potential exposure. We advise the public to avoid contact with sick and dead animals, cook poultry, eggs, and beef to safe internal temperatures, avoid feeding wild fowl, and keep bird feeders away from backyard flocks, and also use pasteurized dairy products. Avian flu symptoms can range from eye redness to mild flu-like symptoms to severe respiratory illness, which makes it very hard to recognize. If someone develops and has had exposure, we urge them to contact their medical provider, describe that exposure, and stay away from others. The risk of avian flu to humans is low, and we are in contact with local and state partners and local medical providers to monitor and proactively use the tools that are available to us, described before, so that it remains low. Again, I want to emphasize that the threat remains low to humans and our agricultural community, and highlight that by working with our partners and using the available resources, we aim to protect our community through communication, education, collaboration, ensuring the public health for Buncombe County. Does anyone have any questions? Thank you.
All right, thanks so much. Okay. Next up, we have an update from the U.S. Forest Service on Pisgah National Forest.
Good evening. Thanks so much for having me here tonight and being able to come here and provide you guys an update on the Pisgah National Forest. I know many of us here all treasure having that in our backyards. We're so lucky to do that, and I've been really fortunate and very honored to be able to be the land manager of a portion of the Pisgah National Forest of the Appalachian Ranger District. So I see lots of familiar faces here of the commissioners. So again, I'm happy to be back here tonight. I have 2 updates for you that I'm going to focus on. I have 10 minutes, so my primary here is to talk about our gap restoration project, and if the times allow, I'll give you guys a shorter update on Tropical Storm Fred impacts, which happened in 2021. That would be up in the Barnesville area that we're still working through. So the GAP restoration project, maybe you guys have heard about this. It's called GAP because it's G for grandfather, A for Appalachian, P for Pisgah. So it stands for all 3 districts. It's a landscape scale project for round restoration. It's very specific to looking at trying to decrease those fuel loads around the wildfire potential and crisis we have here in Western North Carolina, and also looking to restore the forest to fire adapted forest community, such as a variety of different tree species and plants that do help support and embrace fire versus increasing it and having, I never say this right, catastrophic fires like we have out in the West right now. If anyone's looking at the news, it's super hot out there. But this is a variety of proposed actions that we are focused on, and we have done this in coordination with partners, but specifically as we were doing analysis to look at those high-risk areas across all of Pisgah National Forest, which Buncombe County is a portion of that. We worked with the Nature Conservancy, and then we've been working with partners such as the Blue Ridge Parkway and our co-stewards, the Eastern Band Cherokee Indians. To give you guys an idea of where we're at on this is why I'm here at this point in time, because we are taking comments. We're in a 30-day comment period. It's in our draft environmental assessment. So we've had early input and proposal development. That's been with the partnership that we have with over 20 organizations, such as EcoForester is one of those. Mountain True has been at that table as well. Appalachian Trail Conservancy, a lot of our state cooperators, and we meet on a quarterly basis, and we also talk to them throughout individually, depending on what input they have or issues or questions they may have about the project. So right now, we have that 30-day comment. We'll receive the comments from public or whoever submits. It has to be done by August 12th. That's a Monday by 11:59 a.m. or I guess p.m., not a.m., p.m. And so we'll have those comments, then we'll be looking at all those comments, doing a response to those comments, and then evaluating and seeing if we will end up adjusting our project in any way. And you guys have a link, you received some information, but I do plan on sending Sarah, if it's easier, I can send an email that you can click right directly to the link later on after the meeting. If you guys wanna look at comments or submit a comment, I'll make sure I have that for you. But the key thing here, why we're looking at a landscape level challenge, as Lang had mentioned, right, a lot of folks remember 2016, particularly up on the Appalachian Ranger District. Hot Springs would have been the hot button area that we had the Silver Mound fire. But even more recently in Haywood County, the last 2 Thanksgivings, unfortunately, we've had wildfires. One was Black Bear, which was last year, which was a type 3 fire, and the year before that, Hurricane Ridge. So even though we think, oh, we're not the West, yes, we still have our cycles in our dry forest types, usually a 4 to 5 year rotation. Even in some of our wet areas, our mesic forest ecosystems, we can even see fire there, every 10 to 15 intervals. So that's why we're really taking this larger landscape approach, but also working with our partners, making sure we're gonna have an implementation strategy in place that we are developing that with our partners. And part of that, I mentioned already, those collaboration components. So we did develop, we'll get to a map in a little bit here, but there's a variety of, we call them areas of interest, and we'll be able to see that on the map. But those areas, again, were identified based on high fire risk or potential for being able to have resilient forest restoration with those species. But there's 107 areas of interest. And again, we're gonna zone in on what those are in Buncombe County, because that's a lot of counties throughout 3 districts of the Pisgah National Forest. But yeah, the biggest thing here is, again, we're trying to be proactive, be in that driver's seat and be able to execute things and make it so that we don't have those fires that end up creating a lot more damage and stress and concern to our communities. We are neighbors of all the public here and also lots of private landowners, just because a lot of our forest tends to be contiguous, especially on the Appalachian Ranger District. So looking through that, yes, our plan is for the next 10 years. We're actually really into next fiscal year will be in year 3. We did receive funding. We received funding this year and last year, and we'll continue for the next 8 years to implement our project. And that is called the Pisgah Restoration Initiative. It gets confusing with all our acronyms, but in order for us to implement any projects on the land, any ground disturbance, anything, we do have to do that environmental analysis, and that's called the GAP, the environmental analysis. But the actual restoration initiative for the next 10 years with all the partners, that's what's called PRI, Pisgah Restoration Initiative. And so we have funding, which is awesome and amazing. We were selected and we received that. We're guaranteed to receive that funding. We're talking millions that we're able to use to be able to implement and meet these objectives. We also are working with our Southern Research Station, Bent Creek in particular. So research is a part of this component of this project, and I've already mentioned the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians. Again, they're our co-stewards. They help co-steward the land, which is, I would say, even a notch above our partners. And just a real quick little brief proposed actions. There's way more details, and there's a story map link and everything that folks can go and look at. And so really, if you look there, those are the bulleted areas for what we're focused on. So when we're talking about vegetation treatments, a lot of folks can imagine fire and why you burn and why you reduce those, but we're also looking at that composition. So in terms of function and structure, ecological processes, we're looking at that when we're doing those veg treatments. That's why prescribed burning isn't the only tool in the toolbox to help be able to meet that objective of this project. And again, we're looking to restore some of our, if you're a hunter, oak and hickory tends to be something that we are desiring to get back into our ecosystem. So that project will also help as part of that. We're looking at that invasive species component. But yeah, ultimately, again, it's to look and to work together as we do this project and not just doing this on ourselves. We have a lot of folks that are working on the all lands approach, such as ecoforesters, as well as the Southern Blue Ridge Prescribed Burn Council, who works with private landowners on doing prescribed burns. So we are working with them as well. It's gonna be harder to see this in the map. I don't think this is a point. Does this have a pointer? I'll look, but regardless. This AOI here, that black line, if it's outlined, that's considered the AOI, and you also, so let's start, yeah, sorry, thank you. Yeah, either way, I can look, but yeah, the black lines are the AOIs, and the areas for Buncombe County that matters for y'all. So yes, the Big Ivy has an area of interest, but we're not looking at vegetation treatments there. That's just looking at options to potentially do prescribed burn, potentially Shope Creek or up near the Buck Creek Trailhead area. That's what we're looking at for what's on the Appalachian Ranger District. The portion that's on the Pisgah Ranger District, again, that's Bent Creek, and that's looking to do prescribed burning around the Bent Creek area, and there are some vegetation treatments that are proposed in the Bent Creek area. But the Big Ivy, that area, no veg treatments are proposed in that area. All right, so again, I'll emphasize that story map. The story map is easy to find online. It also has a toolbox in there. It has the map where you guys can go in and zoom in specifically to the areas to see about those treatment areas. If you have questions, you definitely can reach out to me about that. And this is just reiterating again the comment period that we have until Monday, the 12th of August, 11:59 p.m. And I have just a couple minutes left, so I'm gonna hit this up quick, and that's not showing, yeah. Either way, so Tropical Storm Fred 2021, up in the Big Ivy area, that's Coleman Boundary Road or Big Ivy Road, depending on how you know it, and then Stony Fork. Those two areas were hit super hard. I'm just showing you some pictures. This is Stony Fork. James Malonis is the 4 Soup. And so just to give you context of those slides that occurred on Stony Fork. So currently, Stony Fork is still closed as we're continuing to try to do some assessments around watersheds and the future of that area. It's flooded and washed out. We've had so much damage in that same spot over and over again. Big Ivy Road, we did temporary repairs to those culverts and slides that we had in there. And then we also will continue to do the long-term repairs of those culverts so it can actually sustain the floods in the future. We have all the funding for the Big Ivy area. Stony Fork, we are still working on, again, we did get our Upper Ivy Creek and Dillingham Creek watershed. We had a plan that was put together from a contractor, and that's what we're trying to digest now. Next steps, real quick here, for you that you might know or your constituents could reach out to y'all would be Stony Fork Road. Once we get through that drafted watershed protection plan, my goal is to hold a public meeting in Barnesville to update community members. There was no decision that has been made with Stony Fork. We're still trying to assess it to decide if that opens, reopens with all the damage that we have to put in repairs into it, or if it stays closed, or there's some kind of other modification that's figured out. We know it's important to the public and the communities up there to access it, so that's it.
All right. Ranger Barnhart, thank you so much for the presentation. Are there any questions from the commission?
I'll just say congratulations on getting that funding to do all this work, and it's very important work to reduce our wildfire risk.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, thanks for being with us, appreciate it.
Yeah, again, if you have questions or constituents have questions, don't hesitate to reach out. And again, thank you so much for your time.
All right. Okay, commissioners, the next item on the agenda is the annual report on the general obligation bonds from our oversight committee. Hey, good afternoon.
Good evening. My name is Patricia Rosenberg, and I am the chair for the GO Bonds Community Oversight Committee, here to give you our annual report. As you are probably aware, we're very new county committee. We're a year old. So what we have really been doing in the last year is setting the bones for what we'll be doing over the next few years. So our committee was created with a resolution to review the investments made from the bond revenues, to confirm that 100% of the bond funds are invested in accordance with the law and the purposes indicated on the ballots. And we have two major goals for our committee. That's to make sure that there's transparency with the public on how the GO bonds are managed and spent, and to review all the projects that are funded by the GO bonds to ensure legal and financial compliance. So our committee is formed with 5 members, and they, as chosen by you, have specific backgrounds. So I have the accounting background, the Land to Sky Regional Council Finance Director. Our banking background is Stephanie Lee with First Horizons Bank. We have affordable housing representative is Joel Henderson with AB Tech. Our conservative and greenways representative is Allison Glacken with Connect Buncombe. And then there's one person appointed by the Chamber of Commerce, and that's Alexa Whitman. Our committee meets 3 times a year, and it's really around the financial milestones of debt issuance. So when the GO bonds are issued, the annual audit to make sure that the county is following proper financial protocols, and the mid-year financial review of looking for how these projects are funded. So the major accomplishments in the past year, we've adopted our bylaws. We appointed me as the chair, and Joel Henderson is our vice chair. And then the big thing that has just been pushed out to the public is the creation of our transparency dashboard. And that is a way for our public to closely monitor how these bonds are being funded, what projects have been approved, where they've been approved, and how much has actually been spent from these GO bonds. And that transparency dashboard is now live on the county website through the transparency webpage. So go check it out. As we have been setting up the bones for our committee, we have not started reviewing project expenditures. That will start at our November 2024 meeting. But what you're seeing on this slide is a list of all the projects that have been approved so far by the commission. And a little more detail on that, there's 2 major bonds that were approved. The open space bond is $30 million worth of funding. So far, the commission has committed $12.9 million of that. There's $6.7 million that are expected to be presented for the county commission approval in the near future. And that leaves approximately $10.4 million remaining. And you can see out of the $12.9 million, which projects have been committed by y'all. And then the other bond is our affordable housing bond, and that is $40 million worth of funding. And so far, $29.2 million of that has been committed by the commission with these 7 projects. And that leaves another $10.8 million that's yet to be committed. That's kind of a whirlwind, but do y'all have any questions? Again, we haven't gotten into the meat, so hopefully in the next few years, we'll be presenting more details on the individual projects and how they've been funded.
Awesome. Any questions, commissioners?
Thank you so much
All
for
right,
having me.
thank you for serving on this committee, and appreciate y'all getting organized and getting to work, and so thank you for the updates.
Thank you.
Okay. Next up is the Community Development Block Grant Neighborhood Revitalization Update, and Matt Cable will help us out.
Good evening, Chairman and Commissioners. This is our required quarterly update from the grantor of the funds, the North Carolina Department of Commerce, for our CDBG and our program and activities. If you'll recall, as we bring this to you quarterly, this grant is a $400,000 award from the North Carolina Department of Commerce. It is to support home repair activities for low and moderate income households, and it is available to homeowners outside of the city of Asheville. The city gets its own direct apportionment, and we apply through a competitive process to serve the residents of Buncombe County. We have identified a subrecipient to receive the funds and actually perform the repairs, and that's the Asheville Area Habitat for Humanity. So they are the provider that's actually going to do the repair work under this grant. We report regularly kind of our activities to date. So the items in black are the things that were completed and we've already reported out to you before. Since our last quarterly report, we have convened the selection committee. So our application actually outlined what the selection committee would look like. It is comprised of staff of Buncombe County who are reviewing the subrecipients' pool of candidates for repair. Those staff include myself, Nancy Williams, who is a CD analyst here at the county, and representatives from Economic Services and DHHS, a representative from Strategic Partnerships, as well as our Equity Office. So we have a 5-person group that reviews the candidates for repairs. So we had our first meeting. At that meeting, we approved the bylaws, appointed the chair and vice chair as required by the grant, adopted selection criteria, which we'll review in just a moment, and then selected the first 5 sites that will receive home repair under the program. In terms of selection criteria, again, this was outlined in our application, but the committee, at the committee meeting, they needed to confirm that those were the appropriate selection criteria and did so. The way that the home repair selection works is it is a first qualified, meaning if you're eligible under the program, first come and first serve program. So meaning as applications come in, you would be considered, unless and except where an applicant has been triaged for an immediate emergency repair. This grant funding does take quite a few steps in order to implicate, so we don't want people held up where an emergent repair is necessary, or if they were referred to another appropriate organization, again, that would expedite the repair. So we're not advancing anyone through the process or skipping over anyone except where there's an emergent need. The individuals all have to be income qualified, meaning they meet those income thresholds. The units themselves have to be qualified, meaning they're deeded real property and they're located outside of the city of Asheville. Again, that requirement given the funding source. And the repair itself has to be an eligible repair. In the gray box, and I know this is small text, is a list of what are those eligible activities. And they're generally major system repairs, plumbing, roofs, structural needs, as well as accessibility improvements. So wheelchair ramps, hand railings, those types of activities. So in the first meeting, as I mentioned, there were 5 sites that were selected. They will be brought forward in batches. You can see here, there's just a map, a very high-level map for the benefit of understanding the locations of those sites. So they have been randomly throughout Buncombe County. We'll be providing maps as we move forward so that you get an idea of where generally these sites are located. We have summarized the repair scope for each of them. You can see a couple of roof repair and replacement activities as well as flooring. In this case, the way that we've structured the program allows for expenses that go beyond $5,000. However, lien levels come into play at that level. So Habitat's approach is to layer funding, which they are permitted to do under the program, in an attempt to keep the CDBG grant funds at less than that $5,000 threshold to avoid the lien encumbrance on the homeowner, which can be a barrier to accepting assistance for the repair. When we review the sites, as we go forward particularly, the program does require demographic data be collected so that we understand what households we're serving. And we do look at this from an equity lens. When we did the RFP process to select the subrecipients, they had to identify how they provided equitable marketing and did outreach to typically underserved groups. So we'll be looking at demographic information, including race and ethnicity, if the household identifies as Hispanic, if it's a female head of household, if they're elderly. So there are certain criteria we report to the North Carolina Department of Commerce and that we will be reviewing in the selection process just to confirm again that Habitat's using an equity approach to the project. So in the next quarter, we intend to amend our existing contract to actually expand the scope. Habitat's initial proposal was for a $200,000 use of funds. They have agreed, and particularly once the North Carolina Department of Commerce allowed us to expand the time period over which to perform the work, to take up to $300,000 of that award. The anticipated impact is 60+ repairs at present. They will continue again to send us batches so that the selection committee can review them in groups. Part of that is because each site has to have an environmental review conducted, and that's something staff is taking on, and the state has requested we send those reviews to them in batches. So we are kind of setting our schedule based on the state's requirements for the environmental reviews. And then we are hopeful that in this next quarter, actual repairs will begin, of course, contingent on the environmental review being reviewed at the state level and confirmed that they're eligible for receipt. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about the program and what we've completed in the last quarter.
Well, this is exciting to have this work done. Thank you. I'm curious, the environmental reviews, what's the reason for that in this process?
So every site, you have to confirm certain aspects of the project, things that you would think of, asbestos. It depends on the work you're doing, whether it's impactful, if the site itself is historic. So it does create triggers and certain measures that would have to be addressed when you make the repair on the home. And again, so we, as county staff, part of our administration is to assist by conducting the environmental review for our subrecipient, and then we share that with the state so that they can confirm that there aren't any additional steps we would need to take when completing the repair to preserve or protect that actual repair activity.
Okay, thank you. So it's definitely extra work for our staff too with this. Thank you all for being able to do that for Habitat.
Yeah, I mean, bringing in these external funding only helps to stretch our other activities further. And in a lot of the projects, I will say CDBG funding is being layered with ARPA funding, our Affordable Housing Services Program dollars. So you're really able to stretch and do more extensive repairs than a single program alone would allow.
All right, thanks, Matt. All right, the last presentation is an update on the continuum of care, and Lacey Hoyle is here to help us out.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Lacey Hoyle. I'm the Homelessness Program Manager for the county. I am here today just to give you a brief update on activities that have been happening within the scope of the Asheville Buncombe Continuum of Care for Homelessness Services. I wanted to start by sharing some of the board activity with you all. The board was elected at the end of April, and received 2 days of training in mid-June, 2 half-days of training, excuse me, facilitated by Amanda Wander, who is a HUD technical assistant staff who's been helping throughout the process of the Continuum of Care restructure. She's worked very closely with the governing committee and the nominating and membership committee. Also in June, we elected board officers. Our chair is Melina Arrowood, who is the Chief Operating Officer of Behavioral Health Services at HCA. April Burgess Johnson, who's the Executive Director at Helpmate, is our Vice Chair, and Christian Chambers, who's the Director of Safe Shelter, is the Secretary for the Continuum of Care Board. And then the other work that the board has been focusing on most recently is establishing some committees and work groups to take care of some important things that are kind of happening concurrently as we're getting things up and running. So they've established an interim nominating and membership committee. That interim committee is going to establish a permanent nominating and membership committee who will then work to try to seat the remaining 5 board seats, which have not yet been filled, as well as establish the remaining committees that are identified in the COC charter. That committee will also be responsible moving forward for helping to establish any ad hoc committees that are created and work groups as well. And then they have also established the funding committee and the shelter planning work group, and I'm going to give you more specific information about both of those. First, the funding committee. The charter for this work group was approved back at the end of May. The funding committee, which I'm a member of, received some training on federal funding sources, so ESG and HUD COC funding, and that was also facilitated by HUD TA staff. And then one big project that we have been working on is doing a lot of due diligence work on the permanent supportive housing proposal for services at the former Ramada site. So a proposal was submitted to the city by an organization called Friendship for Affordable Housing, and they have indicated that they will partner with Homeward Bound and the VA's HUD VASH program on case management and other supportive services at this site. Friendship for Affordable Housing, in collaboration with those 2 entities, has submitted a proposal to the city requesting $1.5 million for supportive services over the next 4 years at that site. City staff asked that the COC board determine a process for reviewing that proposal, and so the board decided to hear a presentation directly from the proposers. They've generated a list of questions. We also sought questions from the funding committee members and other stakeholders in the COC. And then the funding committee has met a number of times now with the proposers to ask those questions, get more information, request documentation. And we're now in the process of developing a summary of kind of our findings to be presented to the COC board. And then we may also make some recommendations about what we think about the proposal and what may still be needed. And then the COC board will make a formal recommendation, which will be presented to City Council later in September. The other work that the funding committee has been doing is reviewing applications for the next cycle of the Emergency Solutions Grant, or ESG. Our available funding for calendar year 2025 is $123,887. You see the eligible activities here: street outreach, emergency shelter, rapid rehousing, homelessness prevention, HMIS, and administrative support. Our COC, our applications are due August 26, 24, and we anticipate that there will be notification of awards in October. So the funding committee has reviewed applications that came in from agencies and is also developing recommendations about what we would like to see supported that will be presented to the COC board as well. And then the HUD COC Notice of Funding Opportunity actually was released on August 1st, so last Thursday. Estimated funding for our COC for that is around $2.1 million. Eligible activities are permanent supportive housing, rapid rehousing, and HMIS. And so very soon, the funding committee will be reviewing applications, scoring those applications, and developing some recommendations on that funding to be presented to the COC board as well. And then moving on to the shelter planning work group. So a charter was approved for this work group by the COC board back in June. And that the members of this new group of folks who are working on this includes shelter planning team members, COC board members, and then shelter providers as well. We also had some folks attend a couple of our meetings to provide some input, including a few people with current lived experience of homelessness in our community, so that we could hear from them about what their experience has been like in shelters and what they think we need to have in our community to get more people sheltered, as well as a couple of subject matter experts, things like harm reduction, behavioral health, things like that. And then there was also a request from the COC board to engage the full membership body. So we held 2 advisor sessions, both on June 26th, where the entire membership and really the public was invited to come and hear sort of what the process has been like so far, what the recommendations from the shelter planning team were, and what we're hoping to see moving forward, and then to ask questions and provide input. The work group developed a request for proposals for low barrier shelter. That was published by the lead agency on behalf of the COC on July 15th. It was due back into the work group on July 29th. And the work group has spent the past week and a half or so digging into those proposals, asking additional questions, and figuring out what the work group would like to recommend to the COC board in terms of unmet need, how to go about meeting unmet shelter need in the community, to include a recommendation for ARPA funding that the county currently has set aside for shelter and affordable housing. So we anticipate a work group recommendation to be presented to the COC board very soon. And we anticipate that we'll be bringing the COC board's recommendation back to you all at your meeting on September 3rd. What's coming up next for the COC is a meeting of both the board and then the full membership on August 15th. The board meeting is at 4:30 p.m. And at that meeting, we have a lot of ground to cover. We're going to be looking at the funding committee's recommendations for those ESG applications, looking at the funding committee's findings and recommendations pertaining to the Ramada proposal, considering the shelter planning work group's recommendations for low barrier shelter planning. We'll also be considering a coordinated entry work group charter, and then the lead agency will be providing updates on Co-Purple planning that's already underway for fiscal year 2025. And then we'll have a full membership meeting at 6 p.m. I don't know exactly what's on the agenda for that yet. The board officers are working to develop that. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you all have.
It's truly impressive momentum and progress that we've seen around this. So thank
Yeah, absolutely.
community members working on this.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, county manager's report.
Just, excuse me, 2 quick items, sir. The first, our swift water component of our urban search and rescue team, the state has deployed them to eastern North Carolina in response to Debbie, that tropical storm, I think it's Tropical Storm Debbie, that is looking to come on board in that region. Right now, they're gonna be deployed to Kinston, North Carolina, and they will get orders from there if they need to go out and do any rescues or any assistance to any of the counties and cities along the coast. And my second item, I do want to introduce to you tonight our interim HR director. She started yesterday, and her name is Karen Marshall. She's back there somewhere. She has led HR departments for over 30 plus years, providing leadership for organizations of up to 8,000 employees. Her experience includes leading HR departments for the following cities: Everett, Washington, Wichita, Kansas, Fort Worth, Texas, and Rockville, Maryland. She has been responsible for the following areas: talent acquisition, HRIS, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, labor and employee relations, risk management, training and development, benefits, wellness, the whole gamut from HR. She's had that experience. She has led organizations and employee engagement initiatives and has fostered work environments responsible and recognized for their accountability, responsiveness, and ability to structure HR performance metrics. So I would like to welcome Karen and ask you guys if you would welcome her with me. She's got 90 days to help us define it.
No pressure.
Oh, no, wasn't expecting that. Hi, I'm just happy to be here, and yes, I have 90 days. Kind of got my marching orders already, so I'm looking forward to have an opportunity to work with everyone. So it's been a great 2 days so far. So, just looking forward to it.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Karen, welcome. I'm glad to have you on the team. Okay, thank you, Avril. All right, no items under old business, so we come to new business. The first item is consideration of approval for the fiscal year 2024 annual tax settlement and adoption of the order of collection for fiscal year 2025. And Jennifer Pike is here on this item.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you. It is once again my pleasure to prepare and present the prior fiscal year's annual settlement and request an order of collection for the current fiscal year. The annual settlement requires approval, and there are several key components that make up the annual settlement. Included is a summary of net levy and collections for Buncombe County and the jurisdictions and districts we bill and collect on behalf of. Part of that summary is also a report from the North Carolina Department of Motor Vehicles for registered motor vehicles, a list of unpaid fiscal year 2024 property taxes, and a list of taxpayers who have been found to be insolvent. That is uncollectible personal property taxes for reasons such as the business closed or the property is no longer owned by the person that we have it listed under. As of June 30, 2024, the Buncombe County regular property tax collection rate was 99.80% of a net levy in the amount of $240,567,235, leaving an uncollected amount at June 30, 2024 of $492,430. Quick comparison to last June 30. So June 30, 2023, we were 99.78% collected with $495,140 uncollected. This table quickly lists a summary of the regular property tax collection rates for all the taxing districts that we bill and collect on behalf of. It's also included in the annual settlement, so I just want to make sure it's quickly summarized for you. The second item is the order to collect for fiscal year 2025. This requires adoption. I simply list or provide the statute number that guides that requirement. This is my guidance and empowerment and marching orders to collect the fiscal 2025 property taxes. So my requested items this evening are approval of the fiscal year 2024 annual settlement and adoption of the order of collection for fiscal year 2025. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Well, thanks for doing such a good job on the collection rate. You keep going up and up each year.
Thank you so much. My staff faced some challenges this past year, and they dug in and did a fabulous job for the residents of Buncombe County.
And can we make one motion with this, or do we need to do two separate? One's fine. Okay. So motion to approve fiscal year 2024 annual tax settlement and the adoption of the order of collection for fiscal year 2025.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thanks, Jennifer.
My pleasure, thank you.
All right. The next item is consideration of adoption of a budget amendment for Buncombe County Schools, Irwin Middle School for ADA and egress renovations. And John's here to help us out.
Good evening. So this budget amendment is to increase the $2.7 million budget for the Irwin Middle School ADA and egress renovations established in November 2023 by $750,000 after further assessment of the building. This comes at the request of the School Capital Fund Commission and will be offset by debt issuance and dedicated sales tax revenues.
And I'll just share, we had a thorough discussion at our School Capital Commission meeting around this. And some of what, and if anyone's here from the schools, you're welcome to correct me, but it had to do with inflation as well as when they first presented, it didn't have the complete design. And Irwin Middle School is just, it's a very old school and complicated around getting the accessibility updated. And so that was the reason for the request coming back.
Move to approve the $750,000 in additional funding.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right.
Thank you.
Next item is consideration of approval of the proposed facilities and designated locations in the feasibility planning study for the existing Asheville Primary School site and associated study of the Hall Fletcher Elementary School. And Tim Love is here to get us started.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm not Robert Brown, but don't worry, he will be here momentarily. Robert's going to talk to us a lot today about the project scope and some of the work that's been done to meet the objectives identified by the school system as well as Buncombe County. I wanted to lay just a little bit of context for what we're asking of you this evening, but also share a little bit of the feedback we've received from the school system. And so in general, what we're looking for today from the board is y'all's feedback on the concepts. Do they sort of meet your goals? And I think Robert and team have done a good job of trying to meet those goals. So we want to hear that feedback from you. If you have any direction that you'd like to give to us today to do additional research or additional work with any of the stakeholders, that's great as well. I'm going to turn it over to Robert. Once Robert concludes his presentation, sort of the nitty-gritty of the designs, I'd like to take it back over, and I'll share a little bit about the discussion that we had last night at the Asheville City Schools Board meeting. Really positive discussion overall, but definitely some questions we want to share with y'all. So, Robert.
Commissioners, I appreciate you listening to me tonight. I am what I think is getting close to the end of this work effort. We started it in November of '23. And of course, it was the Asheville Primary School and then also some associated review of Hall Fletcher Elementary School are the priorities that were established for Buncombe County. The team in which we've utilized is ADW Architects. They have led it with principals of the firm. Keith Carline that is here tonight and Rob Woodruff. I've been impressed with their ability to herd the cats, collect the chickens, and bring all the information in because it has been a process. So a little background on that. ADW met with the leaders from Buncombe County and the City of Asheville Schools to discuss the three priorities of each organization. ADW conducted a preliminary review of the zoning and code requirements and the limitations for each site. At the same time, they developed questionnaires to send out to the groups. And from those questionnaires, they brought in the information and they developed concepts for the different groups to review. And based on the review, Buncombe County priorities can meet through use of the Asheville Primary School and the Hall Fletcher sites. Let me clean that up a little bit, because I have a hard time reading from afar. So the request that we will be looking for in the future, and not tonight, as Tim said, is for you to approve the site study proposed county facilities that we arrived at at the designated locations that we studied. Okay, the Buncombe County priorities. The first priority was the EMS regional station in the west, and is as indicated in the 2022 EMS system baseline analysis, and that was report presented on February 4th, 2023 to this board. West Asheville Library is sized to better serve West Asheville population, and that's as indicated in the Buncombe County Library's facilities master plan presented in May 18th of 21. And then the pre-K facility goals are to replace the classrooms lost with the closure of Asheville Primary School and to increase the availability of high-quality early childhood care and education with emphasis on pre-K programs, and that's per a Board of Commissioner resolution 181016. The Asheville primary site, as we have gone over in the past hour or two, facilities that seemed most suitable for the site is a new regional EMS station, and that's in blue. It's 2 stories, approximately 16,800 square feet. And also the new library, and it's 2 stories, and it was 25,000 square feet proposed. Those would be the facilities for Buncombe County.
Sorry.
Yes, sir.
Pause and ask a question about that map again. So a couple weeks ago, I met with the East-West Asheville Neighborhood Association. They had a number of questions, dreams, concerns, and I'll summarize some of those when you're done. But I just wanted to ask one of their questions, which I have too. Looking at the top left part of the map, there's that island that appears to be that I guess DOT is proposing.
Yes, sir.
As part of the road improvements.
Yes, sir.
Either to Haywood Road or to the highway interchange?
Both.
Both.
Actually, their current,
Okay.
not to say that their future won't modify, but their current creates an island separation, and it moves all the way back to basically where you see the library, the yellow building.
Okay, and I assume that it is that future placement of that island that necessitated the location of the EMS station there as opposed to where the yellow library is. I think one of the questions, one of the ideas from the neighborhood was maybe we could reverse the location of the library and the EMS station, but I wanted to confirm my answer to them was correct, that it's because of that island that's in the way.
It's 2-part. That island, yes, sir, because that prevents you from being able to cross over. But also, for an EMS station, you want to pull its entrance out of the stacking zone. Because you can put a light up, but if the cars are already there, you basically have to wait.
Yeah.
Right, that's right, and you have to signalize to be able to get them out of the way and stop. So this way you pull it to the back, and it allows for an appropriate stacking area to be able to actually get out. That's basically.
Yeah. There'll be some sort of light there at the there's a light there today, so.
Yes.
Got it. Okay.
The third part of that is also in proximity to where they will enter and exit the actual site. Because by the placement that it exists, their vehicles actually don't cross through the rest of the site and the pedestrian way and the vehicular way. It's the minimal amount of contact. So that's also part of the reason.
Okay. Last question about the map, and it's really for DOT, but it wasn't clear to us how pedestrian traffic going north would go across Haywood Road, given where that island is and the new exit ramp reconfiguration. Like, how would you walk from the library sidewalk along Haywood across Haywood? It's not clear to me.
Relative to the DOT's planning, I'm not sure. Relative to an intersection way, we would actually have a light down at where we would enter into the site, and that would be an ability to cross over. And there's sidewalk from the library and in the backside and in the front side to be able to come to that intersection and safely cross.
Okay, so part of this plan is a light for Argyle Lane.
Yes,
Is that
sir.
what you're saying? Okay, I
Yes,
think
sir.
I missed that. Okay.
Yes, sir. You know, you understand that relative to the roadways, that is a continued progress that will have to occur with the city and the Department of Transportation as this moves forward. So actually being able to get the absolutes now is a little bit difficult.
Understood.
That's our best scenario.
Okay.
Okay? All right, thank you. So some of the key features of the regional EMS facility would be a 5-bay apparatus area with high-speed coaling doors, sleeping quarters for 14 responders, shower and toilet areas, a triage room for walk-up emergencies, gear, medical and standard supply storage, day room, dining kitchen areas, decon room, laundry room, and office areas, and a watch room. Those are all pretty much standard in a current EMS way of serving. The one thing that is a little more, that would probably be a little more enhanced here is the triage area, because there is a lot of pedestrians that are served in that area. So it would have more availability to go directly into it and be served than most. Okay? Okay. The key features of a library would be an entry drop-off area. You can see in that circular drive. Central circulation desk, friends of the library room, community room, large community room that would be dividable so that you could literally have 2 community rooms. Children's book stack, activity room and reading areas, maker/art area, young adult book stacks and reading area, adult stacks and study rooms and reading areas, a general multi-purpose activity room for every age, a staff work area, a reference area, toilet areas, storage areas, and also elevator for the 2 stores. You would also have an elevator in the EMS as well. The staff work area is really a significant kind of space in this because it supports more than just what is in that library itself. It supports other work efforts for like Friends of the Library and things that come in with books, things of that nature.
Do you happen to know, off the top of your head, the square footage of the proposed community room as it compares to the East Asheville community room that we often meet in as a board?
I don't
That would be
off
crazy to do that,
the
yeah.
top of my head.
I think they were comparable.
Okay.
We had the square footage of that when we were looking at this, so
Yeah.
we're trying to replicate that scale of that space.
That's great. That's one request I heard from the neighborhood as well, so that's great.
A lot of the actual functional scope is pulled from that library layout
Okay.
and
What is,
designed.
what is the square footage of the East Asheville Library?
Pardon?
What is the square footage of the East Asheville Library?
My memory is approximately 24 to 25, nearing 25,000 square feet. Slightly below that, if I recall correctly. Functionally, the spaces are very, very similar. With the exception of the nuances given in commentary from the library director, improvements, functional improvements. Okay, Hall Fletcher Elementary School site. I've shown you this. This is also the concept that rose to the top. But what we're presenting here is the 1-story, 29,000 square feet, facility. It would have up to 18 classrooms with a student service capacity of about 268 students. It also would develop a parking area and a separate entrance driveway, separate from the elementary school, to try to reduce the conflict and the stacking issues in the neighborhood. And right there in front has the opportunity to improve the parking area in front of Hall Fletcher. And as we know, for pre-K, the parents actually have to park and take their child in the front door to be handed off to, to the pre-K staff. So you need a sizable amount of area for them to actually do that and still be able to flow vehicles around. Land area shown here accommodates that. It also, during the study, the reason this became kind of a priority area is because it has a lot of the amenities that take up a large amount of space, and just basically the play areas for the different age levels. And this site accommodates a lot of that, and also had enough of area to build a building separate from and not have to attach to the existing facility, so you could actually construct it with having minimal disturbance to the actual operations of the current school.
Sorry, I've got one question for you here. One, I guess, question or concern from the neighborhood. This is a neighborhood with a lot of young families with young kids. There's a playground that I assume belongs to the school itself in the southeast corner of your map, just to the southeast of the proposed parking area there. And I guess the first question is, A, will that playground be preserved, or is it being contemplated to be removed for this, in this design?
So no play areas are removed. One area is reduced. You have basically a large area that the school uses and a large amount of the community also uses, and which have the ability to have smaller soccer fields, youth league soccer. What land area what we have left unimpeded and not built on will allow you a full-size soccer field. Thus, it can be divided into the youth soccer. We actually had them to lay it out to confirm that, because I knew that would be a concern. We also would use the lower area, in which we don't use now, to do stormwater improvements, and which are also desired by the community and the city as well, and DEQ, to be able to do some more specific work on that, helping that area to actually capture the stormwater away from that roadway and from the community around and the school itself.
Okay. And I guess just to be clear, I think there's two existing playgrounds on the property, one on the south side and one on the north side. I think it's divided for the different grades of the school. Looking at your map, though, are we proposing, you have an upper and a lower primary playground on the north, and then a reconfigured playground labeled there. And then, like I said, there's an existing playground off your map.
Yeah.
Does that mean there'll be 4 playgrounds at the end of the day? Or
Well, you have actually 3 play areas.
Okay.
Yeah, the structure you're talking about would move forward into the center along with the garden area, which is in the middle, as you see it there. The shelter that is, I will say, to the southeast side, that remains in place. The play area to the south side stays in place, but we reduce it by the amount we need to construct the school. The north side, or upper level, that has a play area. That play area would be intended to actually be enhanced to better serve, because right now it is a nice play area, but it is per the questionnaire and the meetings, it is not serving the full capacity and the different age separations.
And just might add, if you're thinking, there's strip that's heading uphill.
Yeah.
here, That's staying, yeah. so
That
we-
playground in the trees there?
Yeah. in
Okay.
the trees there, we wouldn't need to
Okay.
mess with that at all.
I was trying to eyeball it on the map. It looked like the
Yeah,
parking lot maybe touched part of it or something, but,
No, we're outside of that.
okay. That's kind of the de facto neighborhood playground, and so, okay.
Yeah, it's kind of on a grade going up there, so it's not really buildable. It's kind of on a grade heading uphill there, so it's not very buildable there anyway, so
Those are all my
no reason to
playground
take that out, yeah.
Well, then understand that where we've placed the building, it's at a lower grade than the other building. It's basically almost a 20-foot separation. So you have the upper building, then it drops. In that drop is where we would build this building. Okay, let's try this. All right, here's the shocker. All right, and when I came last, this is the principal thing in which I said I would come to this meeting with is some cost estimates for the different facilities. Now, I understand that these cost estimates are subject to change relative to the definition of the design, the amount of actual square footage that ultimately you design to, the cost of construction at the time that it comes out, escalation, reduction in inflation, increase in inflation. So there are a lot of factors. This is our best estimate with the level of information that we've developed that we're proposing here. But that is not a promised amount in either direction. But we have to get to some point a benchmark, and that's what we have here. For the regional EMS estimated cost, the construction cost, that includes the site and the building, it's $9.5 million. For the design and other soft costs, be $1.6 million for $11.1 million total project cost. For the library, estimated construction cost would be $14.9 million. Design and other soft costs, $4.1 million for a total of $19 million total cost. And then for the pre-K, the construction cost, the site, and it's not a purchase site, it's just the work of the site, and the building itself would be at about $17 million estimated, design and other soft costs at $3.4 million. Just to explain a little bit, soft costs is about the site, meaning doing your phase one, if you have to go to phase twos, doing site survey work, finding existing utilities. It's also inclusive of design fees. It's also inclusive of the geotechnical testing that we do. It's also the materials testing that you have to do during construction, special inspections, and a number of other facets. So in those numbers, that's design and other soft costs, there are a lot of contracts that occur in that to actually achieve a building. Okay, this is kind of the next steps and then a potential future request to present to Asheville School Board for concept approval. We, as Tim said, we did give them an update review last night. Upon approval of the study by both boards, this board and their board, develop a construction phasing plan and a budget funding year plan, because it's, as you saw in that cost estimate, there's a lot of expense in it. Contract with design firms to complete the construction documents, bid, and construct the funded projects. But what we will want in the future, if this is able to progress forward with your approval, would be approval of the site study, proposed Buncombe County facilities, and designated locations. And when I speak to that, I'm only talking about the facilities that we are presenting that are in support of Buncombe counties. Now, please, any questions that you have, additional questions before? Oh, great. Please come on up.
So, at this point, Commissioner Sloan, I think you asked a lot of questions about the concepts, and I think that's what we want to hear from y'all today. Are there specifics about what you saw, about the EMS bay, the goals, what that would accomplish in West Asheville? We know that's a priority per the EMS study. The library, any details that y'all want to talk about related to that before we talk further about the discussion we had last night with the city school district?
Maybe just a little bit of context on the pre-K piece that maybe Commissioner Whiteside and I could share is, I think really since actually predating the launch of the Early Childhood Fund, we've been engaged in a discussion about the need for a pre-K hub in our community that really provided the quality of pre-K education that's trauma-informed, that features an equity analysis, and that is doing it at a scale that realizes some of the efficiencies that can happen in early childhood spaces when you, for instance, exceed, usually it's about 100 kids when you start to realize some of those. And I can't count at this point the number of conversations we've had with various stakeholders around the community about whether they wanted to, or whether there was a possibility of them hosting a hub and the county being a partner on that, et cetera, et cetera. And I think this represents the most concrete vision of how that could come to pass. I think another piece that's become clear beyond the kind of, beyond the reality, we all know that the need for pre-K is as big as ever, is just that there's nothing at this point to indicate that we will see the kind of federal or state action in the near term that would release tens of millions of dollars to a community like Buncombe County to move forward with these initiatives. And so what we're really looking at is a local landscape where the county is pretty uniquely positioned as an entity to say we're prioritizing access to pre-K. We, ultimately believe in universal pre-K, and we can play a leadership role at the level of developing and bringing online the kind of building of a hub like this. So Commissioner Whiteside, you could probably say it more eloquently than that, but that's just a little bit of, at this point, probably a 7-year process. We've been 6, 7, almost 8-year process we've been working on. Yeah.
And we talked about it today in our meeting.
Yeah.
This is what I like about the hub. If we're ever going to get the universal pre-K in Buncombe County, and we need that for the workforce, it will start with the hub, and we can go from there, and hopefully down the road, maybe we can wake up Raleigh and DC, and we'll get some money to help us get it off the ground, more. But I think this is a must. We need that.
With that, thanks for that context. So I know it's a complex issue.
Yeah.
So if we build it, do we have the providers to staff it to where, to put this kind of investment into it? What was it, 20 million or so? So do we?
If we build it, will they come?
Right.
Yes.
Yes. Because it's a significant investment.
It is a significant investment, absolutely. And I think as with, many of the other areas we're investing in significantly, the affordable housing initiatives, will there be developers who are ready to do that kind of work? We do have providers locally who are growing, who have big visions about how they could continue to grow. And one of the major obstacles is there's not space. And if there is space, the process of getting that space licensable or license ready can be quite onerous. So you have providers who have the pipeline for the staff, who have the community reputation that will attract families. A tremendous feature of this hub is that it's proximate to an elementary school, which is what we've seen with the Emma Elementary, the Verner Center that's at the Emma Elementary site. That model is really wonderful because it attracts families in the neighborhood, but it also creates this wonderful continuum for families. So to answer your question, I think we have a very high caliber of providers in the community who, would be enthusiastic about where there's one or more providers in that site, would be enthusiastic about that opportunity.
And I think we can get the 3 community colleges close by, in Henderson, Buncombe, and Haywood County. Hopefully we can get them to collaborate, come together to help to train people, the employees.
This could be one of the areas, I'm gonna harken back to our 3 PM meeting with the strategic plan. As we look at growing
Right.
workforces and wages within workforces, maybe this could be a targeted area. Because I think that is one of the biggest challenges in early, high quality early child care is the wages are terrible. And, I mean, we know the need is there, so maybe we could have this in at some point, just a thought while we're talking about how to retain the workforce that's gonna be needed.
And what would be the ideal, the model, like, who would oversee this? Would it be like what Werner's doing in Emma, or kind of what's the thought process around that? Or is it part of the schools, Asheville City, like, so?
Right, well, certainly, if you have thoughts about this, jump on in, but are you asking who would operate it? Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, there are Werner, Christine Avery Learning Center, Community Action Opportunities, that does Head Start. There are potentially providers who could, that are working communities like Wake or Charlotte who might be interested in an opportunity like this. So, we have growing local pre-K providers who would be probably the first folks I would think of who would have interest in this.
And we would want to have further conversations with the early childhood subcommittee to make sure they're plugging in there. And I think Asheville City Schools will be interested as well, because they do agree that pre-K is needed. So, but we haven't really gone through all of those details yet. We're still at the very early stage of, is this where you want us to be? This was really coming back to you tonight to talk about the study, the location. Is it resonating with you? So those are the conversations, but if we do agree to move forward, we would have to answer all of those questions before we start talking about spending any money.
And I guess one thing I just was trying to figure that out, if this was like Asheville City Schools, if we were proceeding with it, I guess I was wondering, like, would this come through the School Capital Commission? If it's a school building, so that's why I was trying to kind of figure out what your thought process was around all this.
Again, the reason why we presented this tonight is because we do think this is a Buncombe County priority that we're moving forward. If we're talking pre-K, we weren't thinking that this would be a building the schools will build, because the schools themselves are K through 12.
Okay.
So the pre-K will be a conversation that we need to solve.
But the county would fund this out of our debt service.
Or a bond, potentially,
Or pre-K funding.
if you're looking at what are the possible funding sources.
Well, right, but,
Yeah.
well, we would we wouldn't fund it out of our current appropriations for early childhood education, because that would consume all of
It
that
would
money for
consume it
7 years, or
yeah.
6 or 7 years, so you wouldn't want to do that, right?
It could
So
be,
we
it could contribute towards some costs,
Some debt service.
but no, it would eat up the fund, to your point, for many years on end.
So probably some kind of debt instrument would be needed. Either we would just borrow the money, or maybe we go out to the voters and say, voters, do you think it's a worthy project, and ask for approval of general obligation funds? But some kind of debt instrument would be needed. It's on City of Asheville Schools property. Even if we're the funder, would they be the owner of the real estate, or would they own the land and we own the improvements, or how would that work?
And Drew is here, but in the past, they've actually deeded the property to us if we're going out for debt instruments, so we'll have collateral in the land. That's what their model has been in the past.
Is there a way to separate out the Paul Fletcher property, or we would just own all of that property?
If we did an appraisal and then kind of subdivide it, we could do that.
Okay, so they would keep the part of the property that Hall Fletcher
Buildings.
sits on. We would own the other property that we build.
We could do that.
Okay, but if we do go down this path, and I understand there's sounds like there's still a lot of planning to be done, but the fundamental idea is the county would build this project, and then we would basically decide, we're basically committing to fund 268, early childhood education slots at this facility, right?
One of the questions that we put on the table with Dr. Furman has been around, because we've been hearing a lot of conversations about school population dwindling, are there vacant facilities now in the schools that we could utilize and still generate these many rooms? She's looking at that. She doesn't have an answer off the top because they need to look and see what classrooms are available. But before we commit to spending that, I will want to make sure we answer that question for our constituents.
That totally resonates with me. I mean, like, if we were in a growing community, we're in a growing community, if we're in this community, a growing school population, then you'd probably say, like, yeah, we absolutely have to have this new facility, but you wonder, like, is a school facility, I mean, they're closing schools, right? Like, schools are so is there the potential to create such a hub in an existing building in the next few years so that we could put more of this money into actually kind of supporting the students instead of building a building
Correct.
do we need a new building? So,
Well, you know, because now, if you look at Heron and Hall Fletcher, both about half full, I think. So you might be able to do this in the existing facility out
With retrofitting, I guess?
there. Yes. And it'll be a lot cheaper than what we're looking at here.
Well, that is one of the questions, because remember, pre-K has to be on the ground floor to have all these requirements on pre-K. So it wouldn't be just any rooms in that building, but that is a question that we've asked the school system to help us to answer. But
It's gotta be a single-story building, yeah.
so our ask of you,
Well, would it have to be
There are a lot of
a
code implications.
downstairs,
Robert.
ground level and upstairs?
For pre-K, there are a lot of code implications, substantially more than even elementary, of which, when you're utilizing an existing facility, one, a second story, it's all off the table. Even a lower ground story, you have to have egress out directly out. You have to have associated play area contiguous to it. So there are a lot of rules that when you do choose an existing facility, you still have to put an investment to make those code requirements occur. Just want you to be aware, it's not just I've got an empty classroom, I can put children in it. Completely different for pre-K.
So I think a lot of good questions, and I think rightfully, there's additional next steps that need to occur. Our first step is, and what Robert has done is, let's identify the goals, see how this fits multiple bold goals across different properties, and let's see if we can fit. And so that's what Robert's done. So we brought you a concept. If you're supportive of it, we go to the next steps, which include vetting through the Early Childhood Education Committee, as an example, the Hall Fletcher piece, additional vetting with the city school districts, most importantly, figuring out how we look at this from a financial standpoint, in terms of what debt instruments are we looking at, what's the timeline, what's cash flow. We haven't gotten there, but we wanted to know first where you stood on the concept, because there's a lot of moving pieces here. So what we'd look for y'all today is, thank you, Robert. If you're supportive, we'll continue to take those next steps. But I additionally wanted to share just some input we received last night from the Asheville City Schools Board. And what I would say in general, very supportive of partnership and working together. Their questions are relatively simple, similar to what y'all have today, which are, how are we going to pay for this? Which is a practical question. Some very specific questions about the operations of an early childhood education center. Who does that sit with long term? And I think those are reasonable questions that we can look to resolve. Also, Commissioner Wells, you mentioned the school capital fund. And so some questions about whether or not the projects with the city schools would rise to the top in that school capital fund, which already has a number of requests, aging schools across both school districts. So, when would that occur? Also some questions about Hall Fletcher and the impacts to that community by, any additions, whether good or not, to that community. So I think there was some community engagement necessary there. But in general, I think they were just looking for additional details before they would feel comfortable sort of moving forward, in particular as to how this might be funded. one we began this conversation with APS, and a big part of that was the need for a Western regional EMS bay. And so definitely don't want to lose that thread there as well. And if we find that, this project is too complicated, too big, that's still a need that we need to continue to move forward on. It's something that's in our CIP that we want to continue to research. So looking for direction from y'all today. How would you like us to proceed? You can direct us to go talk to more people.
Tim, I listened to that meeting last night, and I heard some resounding concerns about us utilizing their land for our EMS space. To me, the EMS is non-negotiable. As we looked at our response rates and needing to improve those, and as West Asheville's population grows, we absolutely cannot let our foot off the gas pedal on moving forward on that. So if they come back and say, we don't want that, what are the next steps? What type of contingency are we doing to ensure that we are moving forward with an EMS space somewhere within that vicinity in West Asheville?
Absolutely, great question. I think kind of two options. One potentially would be to explore, could we deliver that EMS station on the APS site, potentially without impacting what's currently occurring on the site. So maybe, removing the library concept, but still proceeding with the EMS regional bay as designed. That's an option. Another option would just be to continue to look for acreage, to site this particular bay. We're looking at about 2 acres in that area, and so we could continue the search. We haven't really stopped looking. We're always looking for potential property to meet those needs. So that's it. I think we would continue to look if we can't find partnership on this site.
I have one more question just about the library cost. And I agree on the EMS station. Clearly, that's a critical need for our community. On the, comparing it, because it sounds like it's about the same size as the East Asheville comparable there. Wasn't East Asheville around 7 million? Or how much was it? I know that's been a while, but wasn't that about 7 million? This is like triple that amount.
I think it ended up being more than that. I'm going from memory, but I think it started there, and I think it's not where it landed.
Started at 4 and
Let's
landed at
double
7.
check. I don't remember checking that, but.
It's pre-COVID.
But still.
And can we also confirm the square footage? I think it's not that big. East Asheville's not that big, is it?
Yep, and we can take an action to get y'all specifics on the building footprint.
I think East Asheville's like 14,000 square feet.
14, and then you factor in parking. We'll get you the specifics and make sure they all have that.
A bigger building, which is fine. I mean, it's like the heart of West Asheville. It's a huge population. It'll be serving a huge population.
We'll get you the facts on the east
A lot
side.
of young kids.
GIS is 14.
I think there's a lot of good potential. I'm just concerned at these very large cost numbers. So I just wanted. I agree. Yes.
So, in terms of the conversation with city schools, so these are 2 different properties, right? But these are standalone decisions. Is that the right way to think about it? So, into the cities, to the library and EMS project, the primary school property, is the proposal is like, hey, the Buncombe County is willing to consider this, major public investment in some public safety, and it's in, not a K-12 school, but it's in a library, which of course is like very valuable for education in the community. So that's what we're willing to potentially bring to the table here, and we're asking them to bring the property to the table, to contribute the property to the project. Is that what the kind of conversation is about, or what does this look like from their perspective?
I think fair to say that the city schools would be expecting some compensation for the property, which is, expectations in statute as well.
Well, let me ask a question. This property and everything we're doing is for the taxpayers of Buncombe County, right? We paid for it. They want to sell it to us? That makes no sense to me. As a taxpayer, I've got a problem with that.
So What actually is there? I mean, I know the conversations are early, but like, what is their perspective on that? Like, are they saying like, hey, this is what the property's worth? Sure, if we would dispose of it, that's reasonable, or where's the conversation?
Yeah, that's exactly it. I think, it's real estate, and so part of what I would add, they're looking at how they would potentially develop the site without any additional funding, and so I think they're looking at potential property sales as a way to further develop their interests on the site as well. So I think
To develop that property,
yes.
or to
They need
develop?
a maintenance facility, if you might recall, right? And so right now they're using it as maintenance and storage. And I think that's the two pieces, but what they need is maintenance, storage, and nutrition, food, school nutrition. And they need a home for that. And they were looking at this site as a possibility to do that. If you recall that there's another building on the site that they'll be interested in. And they don't have funds to do that, but they do have land.
So they would put that facility on the back of the property.
Correct.
But they're asking the county to buy the front of the property, and then they use the money for that project or some other project or something like that.
That would be helpful for if we would put some monies towards them to do that, so that they can help to develop their piece of the property.
So
But
just
we're
a
also in
question.
the middle, I'm sorry, Commissioner Wells.
I was gonna say, typically, isn't it with schools, whenever they're no longer utilizing the property, I thought often that actually reverts back to the county. Isn't that correct?
I believe the statute, and Mike, I'm way over my skis here, but I believe that the statute says that we get right of first refusal on the property.
That's correct.
It does not automatically revert to us and we own it, but we get the right of first refusal on that property.
If we're gonna build a new maintenance facility, they would require school capital fund dollars to do that, right? So, which we would have to approve.
And that's where I was headed. I mean, we're in the middle of a consolidation study, so do we need to be having this conversation right now about a maintenance and child nutrition building that we don't know how much it's gonna cost? Because we also don't know the outcome of what the General Assembly is going to decide after seeing this consolidation study. I mean, I feel like that's the elephant in the room when we're talking about this, is we don't know what's gonna happen after that study's delivered.
Agreed on that facility, but I guess the bigger question is, and I heard Commissioner Whiteside a little bit on, and Commissioner Wells, would be, it is their property, and if we were gonna go acquire property from any other partner, there would be some compensation or some consideration. I think that is the question to us, more than would we pay, or would they put their facility in the school capital priorities?
I mean, I guess I tend to see this through a very pragmatic lens of, these are three very pressing priorities for the county. That need for the EMS station can't be overstated. The need to modernize the West Asheville Library is significant, and I could talk till I was blue in the face about why we need to significantly increase our investment in pre-K. And one of our first steps is constantly scanning for available land. And I think if we divorce this from context for a second and think of this as potential acreage that's ideally situated for those purposes, I can certainly get behind what I think the question before us tonight is, which is, do we proceed, do we take one more step in this process? We're many miles away from committing a single dollar. This is just, to me, feels like the most viable way to accelerate our progress towards ideally all three facilities existing in our community, but there may be scenarios where what a future board ends up approving looks quite different than this. But I see the question before us tonight is, do we keep proceeding, trying to find, viable acreage for three facilities that we badly need and that the county's positioned to fund? So that's how I would get to a yes on supporting how I've understood the question tonight.
Can you clarify the question before us then, specifically?
So the question, candidly, we've evolved slightly. We wanted feedback from you and direction as to what you would like us to do. Continue down this path, do further due diligence, yes or no? So,
Does the price tag for the EMS and library include the cost to acquire the property, or is this just the cost to construct it? So we would need to add some, if we are gonna pay the city schools for the property, we need to add whatever that number is.
We would need to
Do we have an estimate of what the market value of the property is?
We do not. See Robert come.
Maybe we do.
For the cost estimates on the EMS and the library, it has the site infrastructure in it, because all the facilities that you would be there would have to pay a portion. Or the first project out would have to cover the utilities. You've got existing utilities that exist there right now that won't functionally serve what you would be building. So you have to design, set the corridor for all the construction, install the new infrastructure, connect your first facility, make the connections ready for the next two facilities.
Okay, but I'm just talking about acquiring the property. So it's $30 million to build these two buildings, but does that include the cost we have to pay the city schools for the land?
No, sir.
Okay.
No, sir. Just that infrastructure.
My other related question is, you would also have to decommission the existing Asheville Primary School building, correct? To build these new buildings in its place. Do these costs include the cost to deconstruct and dispose of the materials? Which, we've done that recently, we know it's a lot. So is that in here?
So we've assumed approximately $500,000 plus to be able to raise all those facilities away. Those are considered in my digestion or my consideration of all the money we've put forward. My belief is that it is woven in that cost.
Okay.
And that would be part of how we would design it out for that associated cost to be able to remove facilities inside of these costs that we've projected.
$500,000.
About $500,000, give or take what we find in the facilities. If I have to abate a bunch of facilities, then a little more. If I don't, a little less.
Ronnie, to give you a good example, when we built Isaac Dixon and tore down the old Hill Street School, what we found out in doing that, and Rankin is older than that school was, what we found out in that was they had built Hill Street and had buried the old school under it. And you remember, that cost us an arm and a leg. Yeah.
So here's my take on it. I think the library and the EMS project seems great. I mean, these seem like a really compelling project. So in a really great location. So I'm really excited about that. If we keep two different school districts, probably they need a maintenance facility, and that seems like a good project too. But it does seem like we probably don't want to commit to that before. That's a pretty significant building, right? Which again, the School Capital Fund Commission would have to approve it. So it seems like you kind of need to put a pause on that, and then just see how the consolidation thing plays out. And then if we still have two districts, probably then would be the plan. But you don't want to start construction on it yet and then not need that building, right? And then my question on the Hall Fletcher is just, I love the idea of the hub. I want to see the hub happen. Are we sure we need to build a new building? Or if we are in this context where there is kind of, a fairly active conversation around, is there going to be a need to potentially close, an elementary school, right? Then it seems like we at least have to look at that and say, could we repurpose an existing elementary school? If the answer is no for really good reasons, then I'd say this is a really good plan. But I would want to investigate that question first. So those are my thoughts on all this.
And to clarify, when you say due diligence, those are the kinds of questions you're referring to, right? We would clear the hurdle of getting a clear answer on that before we would.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you want us to proceed. If you want us to proceed down this path, those are the questions we would do before we even talk about how we would finance this or how we would do it.
And I think we would also want to, if we do need to build a new building, or if we're going to have a building. I mean, we would want to see like kind of a more detailed business plan for it.
Correct.
To record, so the $19 million is a lot, but it might be small in comparison to like, and again, maybe the best project we ever do, but we need to say like, what are the operating costs we're committing to for the next, many decades to run that, and make sure we have a plan to fund that. In addition to, like, we wouldn't want to drop all of our other existing, like, investments in this space too. So this would kind of be on top of, like, a lot of other work we're doing in this arena, right? So we just need to understand what all these costs are and make sure we have a plan for it.
And it would be, how do we put this in our CIP plan and in what years would we do that? So we would have to bring you a financing plan as well.
Right. Other thoughts, questions?
Tim, I have, I guess, one question for Tim and then one thought for Tim. The question is, you alluded to a statute earlier related to compensation to school districts from counties for property. Is that the one that Avril?
That's right.
mentioned?
It's the
Okay.
first right of refusal, basically.
Okay.
Yep.
There's nothing, no other statutes, okay. And then the thought is, this is kind of if this moves forward, it's a once in a generation redevelopment of West Asheville, and so I think people could get really excited by it. But I guess at a future time that you see best, I'd love to set up some sort of community meeting of some kind with the neighborhood and the architects to talk through some of this and look at plans. They're gonna have thoughts about sidewalks and trees and playgrounds and things like that, so let's do
And
that.
I think I'm hearing y'all agreeing to move forward.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll make the official motion. I move to approve the site studies, proposed facilities, and designated locations plan. Second.
Okay, so I just want to like clarify the motion, right? So we just said like, yeah, but there's a bunch of questions, right? So then we say we approve them. Like, what do we mean by when we say, oh yeah, we approve those plans? So are we taking next steps to investigate these ideas?
That was
Guys, I kind of would reserve the right to have this come back, and I don't see this as a final vote on these projects,
No,
right?
no, I think the intent was to move forward with next steps, the due diligence, before we make any additional decisions.
Okay.
Is that how you understand? Okay.
Like any land acquisition situation. Yeah.
Okay. Further discussion?
So do we need to reword the motion then to be clear, or are we?
I'm okay with it as long as we put in our minutes that we are taking next steps to diligence these ideas. This is not the final vote. This is to take next steps.
Not
in a-
approving $50 million, $60
Okay.
million of
Make
funding
that
tonight.
very clear.
Right. I think we're good.
We are prioritizing a EMS space, a library, and a pre-K hub.
That's it. The next steps that are listed.
All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Thanks. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. All right. Next item. Set public hearing for the schedule of values 2025 reappraisal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Once again, as we move forward to the reappraisal 2025, January 1 of 2025, our next step in the process is to bring forth the schedule of values and have you adopt that. That is the foundation of the reappraisal and affects what we do every day. So I ask you that let's take the next step and set the public hearing for August the 20th.
Motion to approve that we schedule a public hearing regarding the schedule for August 20th, 2024.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank
All
you.
right, thanks, Keith. All right, next up is adoption or consideration of adoption of a resolution establishing a short-term rental ad hoc committee or stakeholders group, depending on what.
I think the choice is yours as to what you want to name it.
Stakeholders.
I'm going to be brief.
No more committees.
The planning board for a period of 5.5 to 6 months discussed short-term rental regulation. That ended in April of this year. And since that time, we really haven't had any further progress on the matter because the item was tabled. However, we did receive direction from the commissioners, this board here, to establish a committee. That would be the third square tonight. You all have your work cut out for you. You've received a number of applications for you to choose to seat this committee. And then the dates are, some flexibility is placed within those dates based on your decision tonight. The requested board action is simple. Approve the resolution which actually formulates the directive to form this committee. And then Ms. Gross here can walk you through the next steps on the application process itself. With that being said, that concludes my portion of the presentation.
Thanks, Dave.
You're welcome.
Yeah, so with the establishment of the board, I think we should go ahead and vote on that first, and then we can talk about, one, the application process, and then two, if the board would like to go ahead and appoint tonight or establish some interviews that we could schedule for appointment at a later date.
So what we need to do first is make a motion to establish the ad hoc, the short-term rental ad hoc committee. I so move.
Second.
All right, I'm just looking at the language of the resolution. You know, the, okay. I was just looking to make sure it does clarify, this is not a permanent committee. This is going to be a group that comes together and is going to do some very focused work over the next couple of months and report back. And then their job will be done. So the folks that, and we've had, we'll get to the people who are interested in serving on it. But anyway, it is a time-limited, focused working group, really. Any other comments on the resolution?
No, I'm good.
I will point out that you said report back. We have the oversight board as the planning board, so they will report to the planning board, who will then bring.
And not the-
So I just want to make sure.
We'll all be listening for one thing.
Eagerly anticipated.
Yes. We'll read that report. Okay.
Either physically.
Okay. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. Okay, so we have, in anticipation of creating this committee, we did put out a call for folks who are in the community who may be interested in serving on this group. And we've had a huge response from the community, right? Like over, I think 120 people have applied to serve in just the last 2 weeks since we started this idea 2 weeks ago. So anyway, great appreciation to everyone in the community who has expressed an interest in participating in this. We know this is an important issue in the community and an issue a lot of people are, really very interested in. So we, as outlined in the resolution language, we wanted to have the different perspectives of various stakeholders participating in this process, including folks from the real estate community, folks who are in the business of owning and operating short-term and vacation rental properties, but of course as well as perspectives from people in the community who are interested in how is the growth of this sector affecting the supply of housing we have in the community, and the housing stock, and how's that affecting the housing market. So concerns around the affordability of our housing market, as well as folks who are serving on the planning board to all participate. These are all important perspectives. So I've had a chance to try to connect with folks on the commission, mostly over the course of today, since all the applications have come in, to get input on who to interview for for these appointments. So I've got a list of folks I wanted to just walk through, and once I've done that, if there are additional people that commissioners would like to propose for the interview, then please add them to it. And I'll just say as well, like this is a lot more folks than we typically interview for, a committee, but this is a really important issue. So this might take a few hours, but I think that's time, well spent. And but even narrowing the list down to this was really not easy because people have a lot of great experiences with this, and people went into a lot of detail about their background and the ideas and experiences they want to share. So just for the folks who aren't on the list, just to say we really appreciate it, and this was, even getting to this shorter list was not easy. All right. And I'll just also note that a lot of the folks who applied have sort of experience and expertise in multiple, like some people who work in real estate also do some business with short-term rentals, and also do work in other housing-related stuff. So some of these people could potentially fit sort of different perspectives. All right, here's the list I wanted to suggest for interviews. This first group of folks are all folks who work in the real estate community, perhaps other areas as well. Matt Allen, M.E. Gray, Matt Lutz, Jay Gerlach. Okay. For folks who work in the short-term rental space, and again, some of these folks also do real estate stuff, so there's kind of some overlap. Chip Craig, Amanda Simpkins, Kit Melina Nevert, Judy Davidson, Angela Cote. All right, and then these are folks who mostly kind of focused on issues around kind of affordability, neighborhood concerns, kind of related perspectives. Again, some of these folks also do things in real estate, and some of these folks have also had experiences owning and operating short-term rentals as well. But okay, so Chris Joyelle, Andrea Golden, Kenneth Fisher, Carmen Ybarra, Candace Metelsky Brady, and Prabhu Khanna. Now, from the planning board, we, I think, contemplated 2 members from the planning board serving, and we had 2 members apply. So Nancy Waldrop, the chair of the planning board, applied, and then also Ken Kahn. So if it's agreeable to the commissioners, we don't necessarily need to interview those 2. There are folks that we know from the planning board, and there's 2 spots there. So we could just go ahead and kind of assume that those 2 will be appointed. All right, so that's a lot of the folks I heard support for from commission members. Are there any other folks that people would like to propose for the interview? We will have to narrow this list down to the actual appointments, but just for the interviews. All right, and then this will take a few hours, so we also need to decide when to do these interviews, hopefully between now and our next meeting, so then we could go ahead and make the appointments at our next meeting. So one idea I heard suggested would be to do it earlier in the day prior to our next commission meeting. So in 2 weeks from today, that would be the 20th. We don't have affordable housing that day. I don't know if there's any other meetings before that.
We don't need pre-K.
And if you were gonna choose that date, we of the staff have talked about maybe limiting briefing or something in case you had a lot of time that you need.
That would be, if we could
Shrink that or.
maybe shrink it, not necessarily eliminate it, but keep that agenda light, so maybe we could start late.
Correct.
How many will we interview?
I think this was like, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, about 6,
I had
7.
15.
Yeah, that's what I had too. So about 3 hours, 2.5, 3 hours probably to go through all of that. So if we started at, noon, we would definitely have time to do that and still have time for some briefing. If there's a briefing, some items we need to address.
And we can provide lunch.
That would be great. That would be great. Well, how does that sound to everyone?
I will be out of town for family vacation.
And I'll go through. I'll give brownies.
Is everyone else be available? Okay. All right. You don't have to trust us.
I might not.
Trust you all.
Okay.
Many matters.
All right. All right. Yes, absolutely. All right. Anything else on this item? All right, we appreciate everyone who put their names forward, look forward to talking further. And for the folks who aren't going to be interviewed and be on the committee, obviously, there's still going to be other opportunities for input in the policy-making process, and we certainly encourage that and welcome that. Okay, commissioners, the next item is we've got some other board appointments, right? Yeah. Board of Adjustments. We have one.
So we're moving someone from the alternate seat to the regular. Okay.
I'd like to move that we appoint Paul Wilsinski to the regular position.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, HRC.
I move that we reappoint Shannon Watkins.
Second?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Mountain Workforce.
I move, go ahead.
Move to approve Sarah Hutchinson.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Are there any updates from county commission boards that we serve on? Want to report out?
The LEPC, Local Emergency Planning Committee, was supposed to meet today, but due to impending weather situations, that was canceled. So please stay in tune for any emergency announcements coming and preparedness with tropical storm dip.
All right, anything else? Cool. A couple of quick announcements. On August 20th at 3 p.m., the county commissioners will hold their briefing meeting at 200 College Street, room 326 in downtown Asheville. August 20th at 5 p.m., the county commissioners will hold their regular meeting at 200 College Street, room 326 in downtown Asheville. We do have a need for a closed session. Mr. Frew, could you provide some information on that?
I will. This one is more of a mouthful than usual, so bear with me for a second. This is requesting a closed session pursuant to General Statute 143-318-11A3 in order to consult with the attorney regarding and in order to retain the attorney-client privilege. And this is involving an existing lawsuit and appeal of a Historic Resources Commission decision, which is now in Buncombe County Superior Court, Dunbar versus City of Asheville, 23 CVS 4147. And this board is required to meet on this matter pursuant to General Statute 160D-406K. And we're just looking for direction from the board on a proposed settlement to this lawsuit.
Commissioners, I will propose that we just sit here and ask everyone.
Sounds good. Okay. All right, is there a motion to go into closed session?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, when we vote to come back into open session, we'll take no further action. We'll just adjourn the meeting at that time. Thank you all. Let's take 5.